was just after 2 in the morning when Trooper Ben Hobbs had come upon a sobbing Eric Abshire cradling his wife's body on this country road.
He was kneeling beside her and crying.
And he'd what, put his leather coat over her?
He had put his leather coat over top of her.
After the couple's lovers' quarrel earlier in the night, she had taken off to blow off some steam.
She had left and then called him shortly before I got there, said, "Hey, I'm broke down. I need you to come and get me."
Eric assumed the whole storming out and I broke down story was a ploy by Justine to get some attention. A pout and a little snit before making up.
I had no doubt in my mind she was just going up, making this big circle and coming back home.
He ruefully told anyone who would listen he was haunted by that split-second decision to let her walk out of the house. He hoped investigators could find the person who struck and killed his new wife.
The situation was like this. This percentage of Josh would find the people.
Well, we'll work on it. We'll try our darndest.
But Eric worried investigators had too little to go on.
They said there was not a single black mark, like whoever did it never even tapped the brakes, tried to slow down, tried to swerve away from it.
And the medical examiner would tell lead investigator Mike Jones that Justine's injuries were not consistent with a person being hit by a car while standing.
It didn't add up. We left with more questions than we did answers.
Special Agent Jones knew he needed to hear more of the human story if he was ever going to find out what had really happened on this road.
We got to go back into the epicenter, and the epicenter is Justine and Eric, and we've got to understand these two individuals.
The couple had met when Justine was in college, and to earn a little pocket money, she got a cash register job at a Lowe's. And it was there that she struck up a relationship with Eric, a store manager and Marine veteran.
What do you think she saw in him?
He's a very strong person, and he's very decisive and determined. He did have 2 children, but he was working and taking care of them, and she liked that. She really respected that about Eric.
But here was the complication about Eric. With 2 children from a previous relationship, decisive Eric was determined to have no more. He was equally opposed to marriage. Justine, on the other hand, wanted both a husband and children. Sister Lauren advised Justine to say goodbye to Eric and move on with her life.
Like, what are you doing with him? Those are the 2 things that you ultimately want in your life.
But Justine stayed with Eric. They'd been a couple for months, but she still wasn't introducing him to the parents.
He's the phantom boyfriend.
Yeah, when you know your child is seeing someone on a steady or an exclusive basis, you'd kind of like to at least see who they are.
Finally, after a 1.5 years of nudging her daughter, Heidi got to meet the boyfriend for dinner.
I just insisted that I meet him.
Dinner was awkward. Eric squirmed as though he wanted to be 1,000 miles away.
My feelings were, well, okay, I don't really get it, but it's really not mine to get, I mean, it was Justine's boyfriend.
Did you think he was the guy?
No.
This was the intended?
No.
And Justine and Eric did have their ups and downs. They were one of those chronic on-again, off-again couples. At one point, her former college roommate, Holly, thought they might finally break up for good. For years, she'd been trying to convince Justine to leave Eric and come live with her on the West Coast.
You had a plan in place. All you needed really was her commitment and a boarding pass.
Yeah, and I told her I would pay for her plane tickets. I would do everything. I would fly out there, pick her up, get her bag, and bring her to Oregon.
After one particularly bad Justine and Eric period, Holly was so convinced that Justine was finally coming, she rented a 2-bedroom apartment for them. But in the end, her plan not only went nowhere, it backfired.
I just feel her distancing herself.
Perhaps Justine thought Holly was interfering too much in her relationship. But there was one breakup when Justine did leave Eric and went to stay with her parents in Tennessee. Still, the 2 managed to patch up their difficulties.
I never really thought that there was a match. It didn't seem like a good fit to me.
So you thought he'd just disappear from the scene?
I thought that eventually it would run its course and it would break up and she'd move on.
But she never did. For years, Justine and Eric slogged through their on-again, off-again relationship.
There were times where she would come see me on the weekends and, figure out what she wanted to do next and know that this wasn't the right relationship for her. But they never really broke off communication. There'd always be the phone calls.
He was always in the orbit there.
Yes.
Finally, Justine gave Eric, who remember had started the relationship saying he wasn't the marrying kind, an ultimatum. Give me a ring or be gone.
He came home late on Christmas Eve. He gave her the ring box and he said, "You win."
Oh, come on.
That's what she said.
Here at the 11th hour?
Mm-hmm. And she showed up with this gorgeous, like $5,000 diamond on her hand and said, "We're engaged." And that was how we found out.
And it would be a wedding no one would forget.
Coming up, it looked perfect. Her family says far from it.
He left the next day and he never came back. He didn't stay with her.
We never saw him again.
When Dateline continues.